mean, part of what we come to love in other people, if it's a mature love, is the utter unknowingness of them, the unknowability of them. There is an element in each of us that will not be known. Hopefully God knows it, but it's not knowable by another person. And to some extent, I think love has to come to include that absolute unknowability. And there's an element of wonder in that.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Barylski, the Poetry Peddler. Welcome to the Peddler's Podcast, a show celebrating living language as the expression of what it means to be human. This episode features part one of my conversation with Christian Wiman, who is the author, editor, or translator of 14 books, most recently Zero at the Bone, 50 Entries Against Despair. From 2003 to 2013, he was the editor of Poetry magazine. He's a former Guggenheim Fellow and the Clement-Muehl Professor of Communication Arts at Yale Divinity School and the Yale Institute of Sacred Music, where I had the privilege of studying with him. I'm delighted to present my conversation with him in 3 parts. Hi, thank you so much for being here, Chris. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, Alex.
Well, I'm so excited to talk about your book, Zero at the Bone, 50 Entries Against Despair, poetry, maybe what it can do for us now, particularly in a state of the world when people are, I think, looking for answers increasingly from, nonpartisan, non-sectarian forms of hope and conversation and things like that. So thank you again for being here. And I want to kick it off by bringing in right away the fact that you said in the book, the antidote to sort of the modern crisis of despair is annihilating awe. I loved that. Would you mind saying a little bit more about that to kick off and maybe where you see annihilating awe in poetry?
Yeah, I do say, I say perhaps even annihilating all, but
That's fair. Yes.
um, but that actually comes from Abraham Joshua Heschel. He says wonder is the at the root of all spiritual experience, and um, I do think that in order to the only way out of the despair that a lot of us find ourselves in is to recover the sense of wonder. It's paradoxical because you think, how in the world am I supposed to feel wonder or awe in the midst of great suffering or fear? But that's precisely the discipline. I think uh, that is required. Anna Kamienska has, I can't remember the exact quote, but she says it's obligated upon all of us to feel joy, actually, and then she ends it with courage, just an exhortation to have courage. And I think that's sort of the easiest thing to lose it's actually not hope. It's even the sense of wonder at existence that goes first. And and yeah, I've often found poems to be quite a goad to that. I'm just coming from teaching my undergraduates, and we were talking about poems of love, and there were several of those that really spoke to our moment, even though they had nothing to do with political affairs at all or social. They were about intimate relations between people, or a person in nature, or a person in God.
I love that you brought up Heschel. I love him also, and the idea of wonder and also courage. I think, right, no matter what you believe or where you are in life, building a sense, an appreciation for the wondrous, right, when so much wants to keep you maybe focused on just sort of the hectic frenzy, sort of surviving your day, and then the courage, right, the courage that comes with that is so powerful. And I don't know, I mean, you said, the poems were about relationships. I certainly think that relationships require a lot of courage. I think
Yeah.
particularly the more intimate they are, and certainly demand kind of keeping a space for sort of wonder, right? If you see a person, whether it's a close friend or a parent or a child, your own child or, a romantic partner, keeping the space open for wonder about them, and not sort of brushing it away. It makes me think of the Marie Howe poem, Hurry, right? Where she's like, hurry up, to her daughter, and the wonderful turn at the end where she apologizes and says, "Okay, you be the mother." And then the daughter's like, hurry up," kind of rushing her through life.
Yeah, I think, I mean, part of what we come to love in other people, if it's a mature love, is the utter unknowingness of them, the unknowability of them. There is an element in each of us that will not be known. And hopefully God knows it, but it's not knowable by another person. And to some extent, I think love has to come to include that absolute unknowability. And there's an element of wonder in that, not just fear.
Mm, I love that. That actually, right, we can our kind of right, our response to I don't know this, therefore maybe I don't control it is a sense of anxiety or fear. And so actually letting go in that. And that actually it reminds me, like, I love that you brought up the Wallace Stephen poems. And you were like, this is quite possibly like the best poem just ever. And I have no idea what it means. I love that poem. I also have no idea what it means. Maybe could you talk a little bit, particularly because I think your vision of the world as an editor, as a poet, a translator. Yeah, what does it mean that some of the poems we love the most, we may read them over and over and never have a sense of certainty about what they mean? But also we do have a sense of certainty about what we feel and experience. I too experienced that poem as a complete. I don't actually read that poem a lot. I feel like there's something in there that I'm like, whoa, I don't know that I want to contact that all the time. But it is a kind of spell. And yeah, what are you looking for? Maybe particularly as an editor, what vision has shaped your view of what poetry is that can include a lack of knowing, and that's okay.
Yeah, that poem is called Domination of Black, and it was actually Wallace Stevens's favorite poem that he wrote. And it is an example of almost pure sound, although I think it does have a meaning. It's a kind of spell to ward off fear of death. Um, but I really like Kenneth Burke's phrase "equipment for living," which is that's how he defined poetry. And in my own experience, a poem really can be a means of helping you live your life. And it might not be in the ways you expect. It might not be a message. In fact, messages in poetry can be boring. Um, but it might be a piece of sound that just propels your brain in a direction that it wouldn't go, and also secures your consciousness in a way that you're not really able to articulate. So I like a lot of poems like that. Um, I do like poems like the time that I was at Poetry Magazine, I was very conscious of poetry's place in the world, and everybody was complaining that it was losing any purchase in the world and that had no general readership. And these arguments went on and on. And
The perennial complaint of poetry, it seems.
right. And although the fact is, I mean, there are more poets now writing, more poems being published than ever before. It's much more in the culture than ever before. Um, but I was conscious of trying to find poems that I thought could be equipment for living, that were actually trying to. There was something at stake in the poems. They weren't just language games, and um, that's still what I look for. You know, I teach this course called Poetry and Faith, and both to the undergrads and the grad students. It's completely different. Um, the circumstances in those classes, but the but the class is designed to make them love poetry, yes, but also to force them to talk about the major issues of their lives. And I have found that through poems, they're able to do it in ways that they can't do it if they're just talking. That if we have some object there that they can look at, it frees them up in ways they wouldn't be otherwise.
I think that's so deep and so true. I've seen that with my own students. For many years, I taught middle school and high school. And I think I wanted to do something similar always with my poetry unit for my students to kind of free them up and to give them poems that would help them see and articulate their own experience in a way that exactly prose it doesn't seem to allow anyone to do because I don't know why, right? The kind of magic, the alchemy of poetry, which I love that you share this story in your book about your daughter, which, if readers know your poetry, they would then remember the line, which I did, that, I will love you in the summertime.
Right.
But I think that's true. Like, I think, we don't see 2-year-olds writing novels, but 2-year-olds actually do just spontaneously speak. I mean, I thought the same thing. I thought that is incredible. I will love you in the summertime. I was like, what? I was like, that sounds like somebody could be like 60 looking back at their life, not 2 years old, speaking
Right.
to their father. It's profound. What do you think it is that enables the human, no matter what age they are, to speak about their experience or to voice something that the 2-year-old, as you say, right, she probably wasn't conscious of all of these things that then you write about, um, but she was speaking a direct just line to what some very deep things she felt, right, about when or how she would love you. And what do you think that is? Or maybe could you just talk generally about why from your perspective you think humans of any age are able to get at something in their existence through poetry that prose itself doesn't seem to facilitate or allow as easily?
Well, some people aren't. Some people don't have the poetry gene and simply they don't have it. I've found, and you'll just run into a wall. Even some people who can respond to music find themselves baffled by poetry. Often it's a matter of what they think poetry is, and you can lead them to poems that they'll love. But there are some people that I don't think poetry is for everyone. Kids, uh, almost all kids, however, do have an ability to take in poetry, and we tend to erode that part of ourselves, or life erodes it for us. I mean, Fanny Howe has a great line that we live until the age of 9. We live in this state of permeability or wonder, and then the self replaces the soul as the fist of survival. And I think that's sort of true. We just found recently this summer these drawings that my one of my daughters had done when she was 6, and it was of 3 trees, and the first tree was just a tree that any kid would draw. I mean, she has artistic talents a bit better than that, but then the second one, all the branches and the trunk had been filled with these symbols, but they're like runic symbols. You don't recognize them. You recognize them. She's making symbols for something, but you don't know what they are. And then the third one, everything is turned to language, and these letters spill down the branches to the trunk, and in the trunk it says, "Standing in the stream, I've never felt so loved," which is incredible.
That is profound.
I know. I know. Think of someone at 6 years old, and she must have had the day before, or maybe earlier that morning, she must have been standing in the stream next to our house in Tennessee, which is where we found the drawings, and then made these 3 drawings, of course, having no idea what she was doing. But, but, but yeah, there's something incredibly profound in that progression, and also in that sense of being loved by the world around you. It's,
Oh, wow, I feel like I'm having to take in the story, and even like I have a kind of image in my mind, right, of the sort of tree with ruins, tree with language, right? This kind of move even into, right, I assume nobody, maybe she doesn't even know what the ruins mean, right? But somehow then when she's actually writing in English, right, there's an intelligibility and she can state something. So I don't know. Love, I do think makes us intelligible to ourselves in a way that if we weren't loved, we probably would never be able to read ourselves as in that way. What do you think?
yeah. Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I read that as the love of God, in that moment, that what she's feeling is she feels loved by the world. And I think that's the love of God that is streaming through the world to her. And we're just much more receptive to it when we're younger. We don't even, you don't have to be conscious of it. You can just be in it. And I think people dismiss that notion that of childhood is that they think that you're sentimentalizing childhood. And you can do that, but in my own experience, children they do have a capacity for poetic perception of the world that is just astonishing and not very rare. It seems to be spread among all kinds of kids. So I don't know where that goes. I mean, I know where it goes. We become adults and become crushed by cause and effect and suffering and everything else we realize about the world. But that experience of wonder is tied back to that. I mean, if you're experiencing true wonder as an adult, it is tied back to something in childhood. It's making a connection there that's pre-conscious, I think.
I think that's true. I forget the name of the author, but I read a book recently called Morning Stars by a Jewish man, talking about his town, which had been just completely, like, everyone in it just annihilated, um, in the time leading up to World War II. But he has some beautiful line that, right, if you actually look back, you'll probably find the seed of all your sort of deepest longings and deepest spiritual affinities. So at some particular point, you could point to it in your childhood.
Mm.
And I was like, wow, that is so true. That's so true, right? Even if we have to work to recover it, we actually can probably go back and see, oh, the seed of what this longing was, what this spiritual maybe angst was, right? But a productive one, which I think is so much of your book, the kind of productive feeling of, doubt or despair, but that doesn't leave you with nothing, that actually is a forward motion, is pushing you to want to connect more to life itself, which I love that you quote, Michael Henry. I think he said something like, artists are in the pursuit of the force that is forcing them to pursue, right? And so
Yeah,
the word for that is life. And that even made me think of, your daughter with the tree, right? That if you don't believe in God, right? Like if you're a listener and you're just like, why don't I'm completely an atheist. I don't think there's a God or any gods. Well, that's fine, right? It's like you probably believe in the reality of nature. I mean, you walk out your door and you see trees and flowers and grass, and right, and that's life. And there's a huge, shift in the narrative, even right now in biology, right, towards agency and purpose and meaning, right? And very, cutting edge biologists, including Sir Paul Nurse, at the Francis Crick, saying that actually, when we study cells, and I think he won the Nobel for his work on the study of cells, saying that actually when we look at life on the smallest level, there is a sense of parts working together for the whole, right, to achieve something. And that is essentially purpose, right? So even if you don't believe in God, right, there's certainly the sense that life is this organizing force in space and time, right? And that you can be swept up and into the stream of it, and that children themselves, right, are somehow just flowing much more naturally in it. Maybe that's why we're supposed to become like children. Um,
yeah,
and,
yeah.
and
Well,
you say that, right? People say, well, poetry says makes nothing happen. Well, it'd be like saying, like, you might as well say nature makes nothing happen, right? Like, or life makes nothing happen, right? Everything is happening. It's the context in which all things happen.
yeah. And I think you're absolutely right that the more we learn that consciousness is not by no means limited to humans, and it's obvious in animals, and it might be present in um, some form in plants. They tend to help each other. The quote mother tree actually remembers her seedlings and takes care of them. The trees can send signals to each other, and then actually, if there's a stand of trees and one of them has a blight or something's wrong with it, the other trees will send nutrients to that tree. And what is that if not some kind of connection, some kind of a conscious connection to each other? Arthur Schrodinger once said years ago, almost 100 years ago, that mind.
The Poetry Peddler is produced and hosted by the Becoming Human Project. Thank you for listening and subscribing. To learn more about the Poetry Peddler, check out thepoetrypeddler.com, where you can sign up for my newsletter and learn how to support poetry as a way of life.